So imagine you live in Estonia, right? And you just had a baby.
Right, big life event.
Huge. But here's the crazy part. You don't fill out a single form for child benefits. Like, you don't log into a portal, you don't scan a birth certificate, and you definitely don't, spend your entire Tuesday waiting in line at some municipal building.
Yeah, you don't do anything at all.
Exactly. The money just kind of magically appears in your bank account. And that is exactly what we are getting into today. Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we are unpacking a stack of really fascinating reports from GovTech, Tech UK, the Hertie School, and Nordal.
Yeah, there's a lot of incredible research in there.
There really is. And our mission today is to basically explain the principles of proactive public services in the post-digital era. We want to figure out how governments around the world are trying to make this totally frictionless, invisible administration a reality for you.
Because it's a massive paradigm shift.
Yeah.
We are moving away from this fundamentally reactive bureaucracy.
Right, where you constantly have to, prove to the government that you exist and deserve something.
Exactly. Moving away from that toward what experts are calling an empathetic enabler. The state is actually trying to anticipate your needs rather than waiting for you to stumble through its maze of paperwork.
Which sounds amazing, right? But,
Yeah.
We've been promised this bureaucratic utopia for decades. I remember in the late 90s, early 2000s, everyone was saying the internet was going to completely eradicate government friction.
Oh, absolutely. The hype is everywhere.
And obviously that didn't happen. So to really appreciate how this new proactive approach works, we kind of need to trace the incredibly frustrating digital path that we just walked down.
Yeah, if you look at the evolution of government technology, it basically breaks down into three distinct phases over the last few decades.
Okay, lay them out for us.
So the first phase, roughly from 2000 to 2010, was the e-government era.
Yes, the era of the glorified digital filing cabinet.
That's the perfect way to describe it. E-government was simply taking an analog paper form and just hosting a PDF version of it online.
Right, which was a massive letdown.
Huge letdown. Because it was still highly reactive. You, the citizen, still had to figure out what specific service you needed. You had to hunt down the correct agency's website, print the form.
Always out of printer ink, by the way.
Always. Print it, fill it out by hand, and then often physically mail it in anyway. The government wasn't actually providing a digital service. They were just providing digital information.
Right. And then I guess we realized that wasn't enough, which pushed us into the second phase, right?
Yeah.
Around 2010 to 2020.
Yeah, the digital government era. And this was the attempt at end-to-end digital replacement of those old analog systems.
So no more downloading PDFs.
Exactly. You weren't downloading a PDF anymore. You were filling out an interactive web form, and your data went straight into a server. It was a true digital-first approach.
But, and there's a big but here based on the reports, it had a fatal architectural flaw.
It did. The technology was upgraded, sure, but the organizational mindset was still totally trapped in departmental silos.
Which basically meant the citizen effectively became the API, right?
Yeah, that's exactly what happened.
Like, if I wanted to start a business, I had to manually carry my data from the tax department's digital portal over to the healthcare department's portal, and then to the local zoning board's portal. I was navigating 5 different digital mazes instead of 5 physical buildings.
And you were still doing all the manual routing, and the departments actively refused to talk to each other.
Because of internal politics.
Politics, turf wars, protective budgets, or even strict legal mandates that forbade data sharing. Digital government failed because it didn't recognize that real human needs inherently cross multiple agency boundaries.
Right. Life doesn't happen in neat little silos.
Exactly. And that brings us to the third phase, from roughly 2020 onward. This is personal government, or the post-digital era.
The post-digital era.
Yes. And this requires a complete whole-of-society approach. It uses AI, it uses deep data interoperability to become almost invisible and truly citizen-centric.
Okay, let's ground this with an analogy, because I think the shift in the user experience here is pretty dramatic for you as a citizen. Let's think about going out to eat.
Oh, I like this.
Right. So the early e-government era is like looking at a restaurant menu online. Instead of walking down the street to read the piece of paper taped to their window.
Right. You still have to do all the work of calling them up and placing the order.
Exactly. Then digital government is like using a delivery app on your phone. It's fully digital, which is super convenient, but you still have to scroll. You have to evaluate your options, initiate the transaction.
We're still pulling the service.
Yes. But personal government, That is completely different. That's like having a private chef who checked your smartwatch data, so you just ran 10 miles, checked your medical app to see your iron levels are low, and just has a steak waiting for you the second you walk through the door.
I love that expansion of the metaphor. Because a private chef doesn't just guess what you want. They synthesize data from multiple sources to anticipate your need before you even articulate it.
Which sounds like magic.
It does, but to achieve that level of service in public administration, we have to completely rewire the foundational rules of how the state operates. You just cannot build a proactive state on top of the fragmented, siloed architecture of the early 2000s.
Right. So the state is acting as this private chef. But to pull that off, the government needs a pretty much 360-degree view of the citizen. And the reports highlight that the foundational rule here is the once-only policy.
Yes, once only is absolutely critical.
But how does that actually work without creating, a completely dystopian, massive, centralized database just waiting to be hacked by some foreign adversary?
Well, that is probably the most common misconception. The once-only principle dictates that citizens and businesses should only ever have to provide their information to the government a single time.
Tell them once.
Right. But the mechanism behind this isn't a giant data lake where everything is just dumped together in one place. It actually relies on decentralized interoperability layers.
Decentralized. Okay, so how does that look?
Think of Estonia's X-road system, which is widely considered the gold standard for this. In that system, data stays at its original source.
So it's not moving around constantly.
Exactly. If the transportation department needs your address to issue a driver's license, they don't store a copy of your address. They send a secure, encrypted request via an API to the population registry. They verify the address in real time, and then they drop the connection.
Oh, wow. So the data is in motion. It's securely pinging between these independent silos, rather than being pooled into one giant centralized vault.
Yes, which fundamentally solves the major security and privacy concerns.
Okay, so that solves the security piece. But what about the organizational piece? We mentioned earlier that human needs cross agency boundaries. The mechanism the reports outline to solve that is organizing around life events.
Yeah, this is a massive shift in thinking. Instead of forcing you to understand the government's highly complex org chart,
Which nobody understands.
the state organizes its services around actual human milestones. Having a child, starting a business, buying a home, or even experiencing a natural disaster. The life event itself acts as the trigger.
So going back to our intro, a birth in a hospital triggers a cascade of API calls. The hospital system pings the registry, which then pings the social insurance board, which pings the tax authority.
Yes. And that cascade triggers the most defining principle of personal government, which is the shift from a pull model to a push model.
Push versus pull.
Right. You aren't pulling entitlements out of the bureaucracy anymore. The state evaluates your eligibility in the background and proactively pushes the service to you automatically.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting, but also, a bit complex. I got to push back a little here.
Go for it.
We know that government technical debt is absolutely staggering. I mean, the average federal agency is running mainframes from, what, the 1980s?
Yeah, often older.
Right. So pushing a cross-agency life event service isn't just a matter of, installing a new software update. It requires ripping out the entire operational backbone, doesn't it?
It does. It requires an organizational transformation that is essentially disguised as an IT project.
Disguised as an IT project. I like that.
Yeah, and this is where initiatives like the GovStack specification come into play. GovStack provides these reusable, open-source digital building blocks, kind of like Lego bricks for government IT.
Okay.
And it heavily emphasizes the no-legacy principle. You can't just slap a shiny smartphone app on top of a crumbling analog process.
Putting lipstick on a pig.
Exactly. If a workflow relies on a legacy mainframe that cannot securely share data via APIs, that process has to be dismantled and redesigned to be digital native from the ground up.
That sounds incredibly expensive and time-consuming. But let's look at the logical extreme of this. If we actually dismantle the old systems and the government starts pushing services automatically, does any country actually trust an automated system to issue benefits with absolutely zero human input? Is proactivity just an all-or-nothing switch?
No, not at all. It is entirely a spectrum. Proactivity doesn't mean jumping off a cliff into fully autonomous AI government tomorrow. Researchers from the Hertie School and Nordal conceptualize proactive public services into 3 distinct levels.
Okay, walk me through how those 3 levels actually feel to the user. What does it look like for you and me?
Sure. So the first level is proactive information. This is the baseline.
There.
The state uses its internal data to evaluate your eligibility, but it only pushes a notification or a reminder. You still have to apply for the service.
So the friction isn't totally gone, but the state initiated the contact.
Exactly. A classic example is getting an automated text message that your passport or driver's license is expiring in 6 months, complete with a secure link to the renewal portal.
Which is highly useful, but it still requires me to do the clicking and the heavy lifting.
Yeah.
I'm assuming level 2 removes the application process entirely.
Yes. So level 2 is proactive transaction with interaction. This is an applicationless service. The offer is generated and pushed to you automatically, but you, the user, must give consent, add missing context, or make a choice.
Because the state doesn't have telepathy.
Right, exactly.
So we go back to the Estonia child benefit example. The state knows the baby was born and pushes the financial offer to the parents. But the state cannot possibly know which parent is going to take the Tuesday shift with the toddler.
Exactly. The parents have to interact with the system to allocate their parental leave days between themselves. The interaction is required because human choice is involved.
Makes total sense.
But then we reach the third level, which is proactive transaction without interaction. And this is the holy grail of a frictionless state.
Without interaction.
Right. The service is provided entirely without any user input whatsoever. You don't apply, you don't consent, you don't tweak any options. The government simply evaluates your eligibility, executes the transaction, and informs you that it has been handled.
That is wild. Are there actual examples of a level 3 service operating in the real world today?
Oh, yeah. A great one is Germany automatically issuing tax IDs to citizens at birth without the parents doing a single thing. Or, again in Estonia, automatically enrolling minors into the national health insurance scheme.
Notice how the burden of proof has completely inverted here.
What do you mean?
Well, historically, the relationship between citizen and state was inherently adversarial. You had to prove you met their criteria. Like you had to bring 3 forms of ID and a utility bill just to prove you lived in your own house.
Right, the endless paperwork.
But in a level 3 transaction, you don't have to prove anything. The state uses its own internal data ecosystem to prove it for you.
It really represents the absolute apex of digital public service design.
Yeah.
The state assumes the administrative burden so you don't have to.
But, if the user experience is this seamless, no forms, no clicks, just automatic enrollment, it is incredibly easy for you, the listener, to picture a flawless AI supercomputer humming away in some government basement, calculating benefits with 0 human involvement.
Right.
But the reality of how these services are delivered by actual civil servants is quite paradoxical, isn't it?
It really is. We have to firmly separate user automation from service provider automation. Because sometimes, to make an experience feel like magic for the citizen, the back-end process remains highly manual, completely tedious, and unautomated for the government workers.
Oh man, the Olympic medalist story. We have to dive into this because it completely shatters the illusion of the AI mainframe.
It's such a brilliant case study. So in Estonia, the government wants to reward its Olympic champions unbureaucratically. If you win a gold medal, you get a financial reward.
Makes sense.
Right. And for the athlete, this is a perfect level 3 proactive transaction. You are literally standing on the podium, the anthem is playing, and the money arrives proactively and automatically in your account.
Sounds amazing.
But behind the curtain, there is absolutely no algorithm linking the Olympic Committee's database to the Estonian Treasury.
Wait, so you're saying a civil servant is literally opening a spreadsheet and typing in the athlete's name while they are watching them on television?
Essentially, yes. And the reason comes down to sheer cost-benefit logic. Estonia has a population of just over 1.3 million people.
Right, they're a small country.
Yeah, they only win a handful of gold medals every decade. It would cost millions of euros to build, secure, test, and maintain an automated API pipeline to handle a transaction that happens maybe 3 times in 10 years.
That makes absolutely 0 financial sense.
Exactly. So a human just manually processes it.
That is fascinating. It's an illusion of automation. Civil servants are paddling furiously underwater so the citizen can just glide across the surface like a swan.
That is exactly it.
But I think it reveals a profound design choice. Proactivity isn't just about worshiping efficiency or deploying AI just for the sake of having AI. It is an organizational mindset that explicitly prioritizes the citizen's time over internal bureaucratic efficiency.
Yes. The state is making a really strong philosophical declaration here. The citizen's time is a precious, non-renewable resource, and the government has absolutely no right to waste it. If someone has to do the data entry, it should be the state's employee, not the citizen.
Oh, I love that framing.
Hmm.
Okay, but we have to address the massive elephant in the room here. To pull off this seamless, proactive experience, the government has to connect data across every single department.
Right.
That requires an incredibly robust digital identity infrastructure. And frankly, the idea of the state having a 360-degree view of my life makes a lot of people deeply uncomfortable.
And rightfully so.
How do we build trust in a system that powerful?
Well, as the Tech UK report points out, digital identity is the invisible enabler of the smarter state. But we really have to look past the technical buzzwords here.
Like what?
Like zero trust architecture, which, simply put, means instead of building a big firewall around a department and just trusting everything inside, you rigorously verify every single digital request every single time, assuming the network is already compromised.
Right. Never trust, always verify.
Exactly. And yes, governments will use tools like biometric liveness checks, but fundamentally we have to view identity through a human lens, which requires a massive reframing of risk.
Reframing risk? How?
Yeah.
Like, in what way?
Traditionally, when a department designs an identity verification system, say, for accessing welfare benefits, the primary question they ask is, what is the risk to the department if this isn't the right person?
They're terrified of fraud.
They are terrified of fraud and they are terrified of bad PR. So, to mitigate their institutional risk, they make the identity checks incredibly difficult. They demand multiple physical documents, complex passwords, in-person interviews.
But the people who need government services the most, like the elderly, the unhoused, low-income families, they are often the ones who struggle the most with complex digital hurdles. Proving who you are is hardest for those who have the smallest digital footprint.
And that is exactly why the post-digital era flips the risk calculation entirely. The new guiding question must be, what is the risk to the human if they don't get crucial help right now because our identity checks are too difficult to navigate?
Wow, that completely changes the design of the system. If a single mother gives up on applying for food assistance because the portal locked her out over a faulty biometric scan, the department successfully avoided fraud, sure, but they utterly failed their core mission to the citizen.
Empathy has to override bureaucratic risk aversion. And the second half of building that trust, because trust is everything here, is radical transparency. The trust model has to shift from enforcement, which is the government trying to catch you doing something wrong, to empowerment.
And how do you empower a citizen when the state holds all the cards and all the data?
By giving them absolute visibility into the back end. In Estonia's system, for example, trust isn't built on blind faith, it's verified. Citizens have access to a data tracker portal where they can see exactly who accessed their personal information, at what exact millisecond, and for what specific legal reason.
Wait, seriously? Down to the millisecond?
Yes. If a police officer looks up your address or a health official views your file, it generates an immutable log. If they did it without a valid reason, you can instantly report them, and they face severe consequences, up to and including criminal charges.
That operates exactly like a modern bank account. Think about it. You would never trust a bank with your life savings if you couldn't check your transaction history.
Of course not.
Right. If money vanished and the bank simply said, oh, don't worry, we moved it for a good reason, just trust us, you would withdraw your funds immediately. To build personal government, the state essentially owes every citizen a data statement. So you can monitor exactly how your identity is being spent or viewed by the bureaucracy.
That is an incredibly accurate way to frame it. When citizens have granular transparency and control over the secondary use of their data, they are far more willing to opt into these proactive services. The research is basically unanimous on this point. Trust is the absolute prerequisite.
So
Without a transparent identity model, citizens will just demand to keep their data siloed in separate departments, and the entire vision of a frictionless state completely collapses.
So bringing all these threads together from our deep dive today, we are witnessing a fundamental redesign of the social contract between citizen and state.
We really are.
We're moving from the clunky, reactive e-government of the early 2000s, where you were basically the API carrying data between silos, to the empathetic, proactive personal government of tomorrow. By utilizing interoperability layers for a once-only data policy, organizing around human life events, and dismantling legacy systems to push services automatically, the state is trying to become an invisible enabler.
Right.
And the ultimate goal is giving citizens back their most precious resources, their time and their dignity.
It is a remarkable technical and organizational achievement. But, as we transition into this frictionless reality, it leaves us with a highly provocative question.
Oh, I love a provocative question. Lay it on us.
Well, we've spent this entire deep dive celebrating the removal of friction, right?
Yeah, death to paperwork.
Exactly. But if the government becomes truly invisible, if it flawlessly anticipates our needs, automatically pays our child benefits, silently issues our tax IDs, and registers our businesses without us ever filling out a form or visiting a municipal office, do we risk losing our civic awareness?
Ooh, that's deep.
Right. We all despise the frustration of bureaucracy. But does that very friction, the act of actively engaging with the state's apparatus, play a subtle role in making us feel connected to our citizenship? If the state becomes completely invisible, do we simply forget that it's there?
Wow. If it all just happens in the background, do we forget what it means to be a part of the system? That is something for you to chew on today. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the post-digital state. We will catch you next time.